Today we have a fascinating discussion with our recurring guest who's been on our program for several years now. He is an editor at the Mises Institute, communications director for them as well. Tho Bishop, how you doing, Tho?
Doing great, David. Always glad to join you.
Yeah, it's great having you. Now, this is a busy week again. Every week is exciting in terms of the news cycles as of late. A lot of things are changing rapidly on the world stage, and of course, the big story that we just heard yesterday was this new announcement that there's Donald Trump facing 34 counts of indictments, and Drudge Report says vows no plea deal. Will he be gagged, sent to Rikers? It's pretty sensational headlines we have with this. What's your take as you process what's going on right now?
What we're seeing is, once again, it's part of this continuing trend of just the breakdown of political norms in this country. And I mean, I think it's obvious. I mean, you had a prosecutor in New York City that ran on getting Trump, and he got Trump. He's in a very favored demographic in terms of who makes up a grand jury, who's going to make up a jury down the road, should it get to that point. And while I can't speak to the underlying charges, it's not my wheelhouse, nor do we even know exactly the extent of what Donald Trump is being charged with. I heard yesterday about that there might be 34 plus charges as part of this. What we do know is what's obvious. If this was any other politician in the country, if this was any other former president, none of this would be a matter at all. We've seen how you can get away with just about anything if you are on the side of the corrupt oligarch class. And for any of Trump's other failings, and there's plenty of them, he served as a constant middle finger and a disruptor to that class, all the way down to his protests of the security and the viability of the 2020 election. And there's some that suggest that there is a 4D chess aspect to this, that Democrats so desire Trump to be the nominee in 2024 that they are intentionally doing this as a way of bolstering his prospects. I tend to believe that it's more just out of their genuine blind hatred. That Adam Carolla on Tucker Carlson last night was actually quite articulate in describing how, if Trump derangement syndrome has become something like a religion, and there's no depths to how you would react and respond if you're dealing with the devil, that the left's attacks and their euphoria at the prospects of getting a mugshot of Donald Trump, I think, go very much into something that is not a cold calculation about the political prospects of 2024, but rather just goes to the genuine disgust they have of the man, and more importantly, the people and the movement that he represents, that made them question their own inevitability for a few years after the 2016 race.
Yeah, I mean, now there's also the political fallout with the potential primary with Ron DeSantis and Trump. A lot of DeSantis boosters online for his presidential ambitions were kind of saying that maybe Trump had overplayed the prospect of him being indicted for political purposes. And a lot of folks said that was a big political miscalculation on some of his boosters to push that narrative. And then right afterwards, bam, the indictment announcement comes through. Do you see that as a kind of, I mean, obviously I'm not suggesting, I don't know. I don't think it's something DeSantis' camp themselves maybe put out there, but maybe I don't follow the trail of where these ideas come from.
I think that I don't think people are going to be talking of, in 2 months. I don't think people are going to be talking about, how some people on Twitter downplayed the genuine threat of arrest. I do think that there was a miscalculation on the part of DeSantis by going a little bit off message, and with his comments about the porn star payoff allegations. Not that he said necessarily anything incorrect. I'm sure he does not know the underlying legal issues at play there. But DeSantis right now is feeling the pressure of the attack from the pro-Trump movement, right, of the loyal guard is that, you know, DeSantis isn't really one of us. He's not really America first. He really is with the Bushes and the McCarthys and all that sort of stuff. And I think a lot of those criticisms are, you know, fallacious and obviously absurd, but by not taking up a very explicitly defensive position of Trump that first time around, I do think it cost him a little bit of capital with certain people that like both of them. And it's interesting to see. I think there's perhaps an element there where the personal attacks that Trump has waged at DeSantis, which have, you know, have been typical, characteristic, and horrible. I mean, that's, you know, including, you know, alleging that DeSantis is, you know, basically a pedophile, as Trump did a few months ago. You know, that's part of the dirt of the arena. Politics is a messy game. But if DeSantis wants to succeed in that, he can't allow his judgment to be meddled by Trump's attacks. And I think that was a miscalculation on his part. And you saw it, I think, you know, doubling, you know, I think that he took a much stronger stance yesterday by saying, you know, making it very clear. And he kind of alluded this week before, but again, lost in the messaging, that Florida is not going to assist in any sort of extradition process. And, you know, I think that angle is a lot more interesting. And you know, I think that, you know, if you're in Trump's camp, you're now kind of in this interesting dynamic where, you know, all the reports are that Trump does plan to turn himself into New York in the prosecution next week. But if you have the governor of the state saying that he's not going to extradite, then, you know, and if you really believe that this is a massive break of political norms, if you believe all the rhetoric that you've heard from the former president and his supporters about the breakdown of the American justice system, the weaponization of the justice system, you know, I don't know why a Donald Trump wouldn't, you know, maintain safe harbor in Florida. I don't know why, you know, to me, like there's an element there where, you know, taking this to the next level and you know, escalating the game yet again by refusing to go along and kind of calling, you know, and kind of forcing DeSantis, which would then place DeSantis kind of in a position to, you know, act as he has stated. Of course, then that sort of action would perhaps benefit DeSantis in an interesting way in this 2024 shadow primary that's going on right now. So there's the political dynamics and the calculations between DeSantis and Trump are very much in play, I think, into the response and handling of this as the obvious political intent of the prosecution itself. And so again, the beauty of politics is that it can, you know, make, yeah, it throws all sorts of toxicity and
he wouldn't be able to do any of his MAGA rallies around other states, right?
Well, yeah, he would just go stay on a red state tour. You know, create a compact of governors that refuse to indict or to extradite.
Like no tours of New Hampshire.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I wonder how Sununu would handle that. But yeah, no, I mean, it's an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, it's yeah. I think he wants he seems, I mean, from what we hear, he wants the pictures of him.
Oh yeah, of course he does.
Right?
Of course he does. But again, and that goes
why does Trump want the picture of him being handcuffed?
Oh, because I mean, you can see it right now. I mean, just imagine. I mean, think of how many shirts they're going to sell of the Trump mugshot, you know, on a T-shirt. Like that's going to be very, very popular material right there. I mean, Trump loves. I mean, Trump's strongest argument for 2024, right, is revenge tour. And there's nothing, and this is something that's, you know, this is universal in politics. The populist figure benefits from the disdain of the ruling class. And there's nothing that shows that more than the, you know, the image of him in handcuffs, right? You know, there's, you know, to a certain extent.
He's going to become a folk hero if he plays.
Yeah.
Right.
They are propping up that opportunity. Now, the Democrats are calculating that, oh, it's going to turn off, you know, middle America and swing voters. That's not going to sway, you know, that the people that are really, that are energized by that are already baking the Republican cake. And there might be, you know, we'll see. Well, there might be some truth in that. I mean, again, the underlying issues, you know, it would be interesting to see exactly what all is baked into this indictment. I was reading a report this morning that it sounds like the scope of the investigation is not simply the Stormy Daniels payoff, but kind of a broader scope of the way that he handled NDA issues with, you know, alleged affairs, which, I mean, given Donald Trump's history, I'm sure most of that is probably true. And so I think they're also kind of counting that the scandal of that are going to turn off the suburban women that he always had a difficult time turning out, the people that helped swing the 2022 midterm in a way that was very disappointing to Trump in the Republican Party. And so I think that is part of that calculation there. But at the same time, if people are angry, if people see this stuff as petty little things, if you're also have to remember that you're in America where scandal and trash TV is extremely popular. I'm interested to see how this actually plays out over time. But I think from the Trump orbit, though, they want the martyr symbol, right? Because ultimately, it's very difficult for him to have the same sort of campaign they had in 2016 on Drain the Swamp. And, I know how corrupt these people are because, I've paid them in the past. And, it's difficult to take that outsider role if you've already been president. And so this now, it's not quite that outsider role, but it is the most hated man in Washington role. And that is this indictment is the biggest asset that Trump has, because outside of that, he talks about the issues. His issues sound like more or less the watered down version of 2016. Now with the execution of drug dealers kind of thrown in there, and that I don't think that's not enough. And I think that there, when you add the COVID dynamic and DeSantis handling there, I think that they are right in recognizing that no one benefits perhaps more politically from this than in at least the medium term. I mean, I don't know how it plays out in the short term. I'm sure it'd be good fundraising for Bragg and the Democrats. But in the medium term, I think that Donald Trump is going to see an uptick of support and as a rally behind the champion sort of mentality there. And I know, speaking to people in my own community up here in the Panhandle, I have a lot of people that are very torn. Many of them are would prefer DeSantis over Trump in 2024, but they're even to the extent that after this DeSantis should really reconsider jumping in and holding out another 4 years, because man, I'm livid. And I want to run Trump down their throats one more time, and I think that's going to be a sentiment that's not going to be unique to simply my social circle.
Yeah, I think you're right on that, and because it just looks annoying at that point when someone's being enclosed with all these criminal things. That okay, now we have friendly fire too. There's a dynamic there where it feels like this is just bad timing on the political narrative of that. And then you've got this feeding frenzy with all these criminal investigations. This was the one no one was really taking seriously.
Right.
I remember on radio many weeks you were talking about, I'm concerned about the Georgia one. You kept saying you were concerned about the Georgia one producing some results. And I don't know what's taking so long with that whole dramatic thing. They had that girl going on her tour snickering about what she has in store for it's pathetic how that stuff was going on. And then you have this other one with the special prosecutor. And then is there anything else? I can't keep count of all the different criminal investigations.
Well, I mean, some of the other ones in the federal level were baked into the January 6th committee that has now kind of been killed because of the Republican success in the House. But there was kind of specter there of some federal charges attached to that. And I guess I don't know if those are completely off the table, because they a lot of that evidence, if that would be a DOJ decision, it wouldn't be a committee decision in that regard. And so, but there was no indication from Garland that he's planning on going down that route. But the Georgia case still very much is active. And so, yeah, I mean, it's possible that he could, this may not be the last indictment of Donald Trump in this process. And, how does that look if you have multiple cases there? And again, historically, I mean, we have seen.
I think it'd be so much drama and confusion. It's almost just.
Well, and it makes it terrible. Again, if you're Ron DeSantis, it's going to consume so much oxygen in the news cycle, right? The trial of Trump, or I'm not that I'm predicting this actually going to get to trial, but like the prosecution of Trump, the case against Trump is going to just consume, which is exactly the way it all played out in 2016. And so that's going to make it a lot harder to mount a primary campaign there. And the thing is, and historically, I mean, while this is unprecedented within the U.S., this is not unprecedented in other parts of the globe where we've seen political opposition locked up. There's been a lot of kind of commentary of late about the Brazilianation of American politics, kind of going into the growing diversity of America as a nation, which kind of is growing increasingly more towards something that resembles more of kind of the diversity of Brazil's nation and political makeup, the breakdown, the erosion of political norms. And I think that, and in Brazil, right, you have this recurring process, and we might see it repeated out with Trump ally Javier Bolsonaro, who just yesterday boarded a plane to return to Brazil after their own version of January 6th. I mean, it's so funny how so much of this stuff rhymes. But there's been a long period there of political opposition being arrested. We've seen this play out in all sorts of banana republics, and I think that's one of the interesting things about this is that the domestic political calculation is one thing, and I think it's a lot of soap opera and drama, and all that's going to end up being decided more or less by electoral battles going on next calendar year. But there's another element to this, which is the breakdown of the international prestige of the U.S. While you will certainly have certain sycophantic countries, particularly within Europe, that are going to be high-fiving Biden behind closed doors, saying, "Well, golly gosh darn, I'm sure glad you took care of the orange threat and whatever." Outside of that very American European, and I think the Europe political environment, it's the most toxic out there. I think Europe is not the people, but I think the Europe political system has become a tumor in terms on civilized society in a variety of ways. Outside of that, though, this resonates. This looks very different to South American politicians. This looks very different to the East. And what we have is that a America whose global standing has been so grounded in the rule of law and institutional stability and soft power, backed by hard power, and economic health. We're seeing all these sort of things be chipped away, and global actors specifically interested in trying to fill some of these voids. And so I think this dynamic on what is the international consequence of the prosecution of a former political opponent, that dynamic is a whole nother aspect to this, that I think is far more important than in the stuff that really matters than the tawdry, vulgar politics of domestic team red versus team blue.
Yeah, you got the first president in recent history to start a trade war beginnings with China getting arrested. And then you've got the first president who was trying to normalize relationship, or at least de-escalate the narrative against Russia, getting arrested. So there's a lot of signals, that are being sent to a lot of these folks saying, okay, I kind of understand, where America's heading if this is the kind of game that this uniparty is playing. I guess we can count on, a lot of these folks are probably thinking, I guess we can count on that the politics of the Biden regime represents the politics of America for the next few decades on a consistent level. That's what I think they're baking into the cake right now. And I think they're expecting that anybody like a DeSantis or whoever else would emerge outside of Trump is probably going to not veer too far off the window of what Biden's foreign policy represents right now. And I think that's going to be baked into what they do as they kind of get away from this dollar reserve standard,
Well, I think it's also just baked into, I think, the larger concerns about the viability of Republicans generally as well. I mean, I think that internationally, they probably see a lot more likelihood of the entrenched political class, having its way. And you're seeing very deliberate turns to this. And again, outside of Europe, though, even in the case of Europe, you had France this week announcing that it was doing energy purchases with the yuan, which is very interesting. But outside of that, Europe still kind of maintains that very subservient. This is very interesting. It's in some ways subservient. Some ways they are the tip of the spear in terms of regulation, economic policies. So it's kind of an interesting back and forth there, where they're the lead on a lot of government authoritarian dynamics, and yet still very submissive, I think, in terms of their ability to pursue international in terms of their international relations profile with the rest of the world. But the thing is that everywhere else is adapting and they're moving on. And this is why you have, historic things like Iran, making a peace deal with Saudi Arabia at the moderation of China. You have Brazil engaging in closer economic relationships with China. You have Brazil and Argentina talking about creating a common currency for South America, which it is worth noting that stating these things and even them having being the policy goals of these states do not mean they will be successful, do not mean that they will have even the impact of undermining the dollar. When I think of there are certain aspects that you need to really have a currency that's going to have any sort of genuine life and momentum. Part of that is, stability and regime, good banking policies and all those sort of, minutia. And when I think of these things, I do not think about Argentina nor Brazil. So I don't want to overly emphasize, the press releases of certain regimes that are saber rattling against the U.S. right now. But when you see this in such a broad scale, when you see it combined with moves by, places like El Salvador and Africa, that have been very interested in increasing Bitcoin as part of their financial portfolio. When you've seen larger global trends in terms of gold and purchasing gold is itself a move against the dollar, and the stability of the dollar. When you see the response of America itself to this, with some of the ways that they're actively trying to debank crypto industries and to make it harder to opt out of the dollar system. And in many ways, this started, I think, 2018, where one of the central bankers that was first sort of raising the warning sign about the politicalization of the dollar and the dependability of American economic leadership was Mark Carney of the Bank of England. And this wasn't China. This wasn't Russia. I mean, this was, one of our closest allies. We have a special relationship. Bank of England was saying that the globe needs to be looking to an alternative to the dollar because America has no problem politicizing the financial system. And that carries concerns for our own sovereignty and our own well-being. Now, he was responding to Trump, fine, but that underlying dynamic is still there. And so while Europe might be less inclined to pursue these sort of things with a Biden-Yellen regime, those same warning signs exist for those that do not share the ideological preferences of that Biden-Yellen regime. And this is why we're seeing, again, a lot of this growth within, we can call it more nationalistic countries, less Western nations, less those that are the most skeptical of the sort of globo homo, homogenous being the homo there, perspective of the Davos elites and the desire to kind of make everything kind of look and feel the same and operate the same and be centralized. That's where this dynamic is going on right now. And again, this started off with warnings with the Bank of England not that long ago.
Is that one of the reasons why the Uniparty might want to have Trump locked up, is because it's a signal, hey, look, we're a stable regime, guys. We're not going to play, because if you think about it from their perspective, they might want to send a signal like, okay, look, we're going to trade in some of our soft power above the fray branding, but we're going to trade it in to show you guys, don't you worry, we're never going to have a guy off script again running around at your meetings and playing a whole different narrative. We're all locked in to the model that we've been moving towards, so you can trust our dollar. So watch, we're gonna make it as good as these handcuffs on this man.
Perhaps to a certain extent, and I think this is particularly true with Europe. I think that is particularly true with like the way that the Bank of England would view the thing now. Thing is, though, is that Trump had pretty good relations with a lot of non-European leaders. You can think of Abe with Japan. I think in many ways, Trump's relationship with Beijing is actually better than Biden's is right now. Trump was a lot more active in trying to negotiate a deal, a trade deal. Now, again, admittedly, it was to a trade war that he started, but he always saw the trade war as a means of negotiation for national self-interest. Like, right, you can kind of negotiate with a figure like Trump, because like Trump's not going to tell you the ideological, direction that you need to take your country. He just wants you to buy more soybeans from Iowa farmers, right? Like that's what Trump cares about. He's very transactional with the way that he was dealing with these sort of things. He didn't care about, the Uyghurs in China. And yet now you have the Biden administration that they're all about their feelings and their ideologies. And they see that their mission in life is to make the world, better under the progressive utopia, to protect, so that every place in the world, there's not a corner of the globe where, trans kids, can't be reading child porn and, fourth grade educations, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is what motivates them. And it's much harder for Beijing to negotiate with that. And then obviously you add in the Russia dynamic, you add in the complexities of the world and all the tensions that these clashes of visions have created, on various different fronts. And you've now gotten something where they can't untangle it. Now, what I think is interesting is going back to DeSantis. I think that there is an element to where the true grown-ups in the room, which are not in Washington, and I'm going to be a little bit out of character here by suggesting that some grown-ups by saying some somewhat nice things about Wall Street. But I think that there are a lot of old school Wall Street people that care about their position on the global stage and that see, these are lifelong Democrat donors, but see that the inmates have taken over the asylum. We saw this play up a little bit last year where Jamie Dimon was outright, condescending to, one of the lunatics, Cori Bush, I think it was the woman from Michigan, one of the really crazy, dumb, genuinely dumb members of the Democratic caucus. And, it was something about, why isn't JP Morgan, does it plan on getting rid of its investments in, American oil manufacturing? He's like, no, like that's insane. And like it would have a devastating consequence of the American economy as a whole if you did it. Like, we're not going to do that. Like, you lunatic. It's basically what he said. And so I think those players, that I think is the most interesting dynamic to this larger thing, because
moderate Democrats,
the moderate Democrats, and it's funny because it's a bit of that corporate class, but I think that they are the ones that it wouldn't be at all surprising that if you were to be honest with them behind closed doors, I don't think that they particularly care for DeSantis's cultural war stuff. I'm sure there's plenty of stuff that they would criticize about DeSantis, but I think they in particular would be very much hoping for a DeSantis victory, only because it would put the Democrat clowns out of power and it would bring some stability that they just don't. They don't think that they can get from Trump.
What part about the clownishness of the Biden regime is most bothersome to them? It's not the woke stuff. It's probably the climate change ideology, crippling so much of, things that we actually need, like energy.
I think the issue is that the two have combined. Like it's one thing if you have to write a $10 million check every year to whatever the in vogue gay charity is, right? Like that's the woke stuff that JP Morgan wants is to sponsor the Pride Parade down in downtown New York City, right? They want to just you throw off. You make your charitable investments to get the goodwill that you need and the press that you need, but for the most part, they want to be able to operate.
Right? Or you have to pay.
So they want to tithe to the civic religion at hand, whatever has power, and they want to be able to conduct their business the way they want to conduct business, and they want to make money. Now, often that they want to be bailed out and all this sort of stuff. It's like, I'm certainly not trying to portray these guys as some sort of heroic entrepreneurs out there, but for the most part, though, they're not lunatics. Right, they've got many other issues, but they're not lunatics. They don't want to see the destruction of the country. They want to, they want that version of Reagan Clinton style American exceptionalism. They want to have faith that the country is going to be better off in the future. for whatever motivation they might have, right? I don't, I'm not, but I don't think that they want to see the destruction of the U.S. They don't buy into this. Their priorities are economic. They're not ideological. Some of them, now again, there are segments of that group that are totally bought into, Klaus Schwab, Davos crowd. So I think that this is where you have to have a little bit of nuance between the truly committed Great Reset folks and those that, go along and then will, tell you with a glass of bourbon that costs more than my monthly payment, and a nice cigar, that will mock these people, to their bros and behind closed doors. But I think there is that element within aspects of corporate America that are desperate for a grown-up in the room. And now what that looks like in a Biden versus Trump dynamic, I have no idea. But I think that's where the DeSantis line matters, where so if we think about this in historical terms, I think that the path that, a DeSantis-like figure has to cut out within all this chaos. I mean, there is no stable ground out there from any side. The path that a DeSantis would have to carve out would be very much the term Caesarian politics gets thrown out there a great deal, loosey-goosey, but I think that it's particularly right here because the real key, the real success to Caesar was not simply that he was a populist loved by the people, but he also had the respect and relations of enough, not all, but enough of the noble families of Rome. Get plenty of critics, but he was able to get enough of them on board that he was able to unite divides that had been long plaguing the Republic, right? And so ultimately, a DeSantis-like figure has to be able to maintain a hand. He has to be seen as the champion by a lot of the Trump sympathetic crowd, a lot of the America First crowd, but still be able to have the ability of having the Roman elite come to him, not because they think that they can guide him, right? Not because they think they can buy him. That was not the motivation that they had for cozying up to Caesar. They went to Caesar because they thought Caesar would protect them from the mob. And ultimately, I think that's where this dynamic goes. And again, now how does the Trump trial, in fact, as we said earlier, I have no idea. I mean, that might not turn out. But I think that there's going to be a lot of people desperate.
Why wouldn't it go to trial? He's not going to.
Well, I mean, but I'm just talking about the political fallout there. So again, this might not longer be on the table. But I think there's going to be a lot of powerful people desperate for an adult in the room, and I think that's where I think DeSantis is going to be seen by many as that adult, which is going to raise suspicion because whenever you see a Jamie Dimon supporting a Republican, then you think, oh, well, this is going to be another Bush-style moderate. I get that, but
has Dimon indicated interest in DeSantis?
Not yet. I'm projecting that.
Well, how would you going to get a Dimon to get on board as well as Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin?
I think very easily. I'm the same way that you had. I mean, Donald Trump was cashing checks. I mean, it's about what it's the question is what's the sort of campaign that DeSantis runs. And again, this goes back to DeSantis' mishandling of the Trump indictment.
But see, the Wisconsin, I think the working class, blue collar folks that came out in droves for Trump in Wisconsin and Michigan, Pennsylvania, they want that messiness. They want that barroom brawler, and DeSantis doesn't want to play that game. They don't. I mean, they're like, okay, I disagree. Well, yeah. You gave some good things, culture war wins in Florida, but I don't want someone on script. I want someone who's just going to brawl and go messy too.
Well, I think that if you want to, I mean, again, I would argue that DeSantis has done more to punch corporate America in the face than Donald Trump ever did.
Well, that Disney thing kind of isn't playing out so good.
Well, I mean, it's difficult. I mean, these things are not easy. I mean, political power itself is not the only tool out there, and so the fact that there is, the Disney situation also hasn't ended. That's a continuing fight. It's not an ended fight.
I guess what I'm saying is there's a difference between what a Claremont Institute views a tough guy is versus a guy.
You're right, and America's going to the American people are going to get the government they deserve.
Yeah.
And so if you're absolutely right that there's going to be large percentages of this country that do not care about the quality of the political climate, but are going to just want to burn the entire thing down. I don't think that's going to end. I mean, guys, again, I don't think, the extent to which Donald Trump would be, would succeed, I think, in a second term would be entirely based upon the fact that he would hire a lot of the same people that DeSantis did. But it's still there. You're relying upon his instincts as an individual to have improved significantly from, the disappointing first term. And I don't know if I don't know if that, I think it's one thing to have this. He's going to be inheriting a much harder situation than he did in 2016. And so it's very well might be true that anger is going to benefit over wisdom. I mean, that's often the way things go. But I think that would be a very I think that's a devastating. I think that's a negative thing. I think that's a reason to be more pessimistic in the long run. And it's
I'm
going to
not
be
making a case for one or the other. Anybody. I'm
no. But I think that you are correctly identifying.
You know what I'm saying? The Claremont,
absolutely.
What a Claremont Institute fan, because there's a lot of folks that talk about the Caesar stuff. What they think of as a tough Caesar is different from what a working class blue collar worker that was not going to vote for typical Republican but came out for Trump in those Rust Belt states. They want two different kind of attributes of tough.
Well,
I mean, there might be some overlap, but
right. The thing though is again, the question is who can really do damage to your enemies. And DeSantis has done more, has proven to be a lot more effective. And so this is DeSantis's dynamic though. This is his issue, is that DeSantis succeeds at doing what Rust Belt people want. DeSantis has succeeded at doing more of what your average Trump loyalist wants than Trump has in policy. The difference is style and rhetoric. Mm-hmm. And so that's going to be the question: is whether there is any is whether DeSantis can overcome the charisma of Trump, particularly given the sexiness of being, everyone loves a criminal, right? There's nothing sexier than a bad boy. Can he overcome that superficial emotional dynamic? And I don't think, I think it's a very, very likely dynamic there where he can't. I think this is what democracy does. This is why democracy, this is the failure of democracy in this regard, is because I do not think that we should have any faith that a lot of people are going to be able to recognize the actual, or going to prioritize actual wins over Trump storylines.
Story is everything. Story is everything. And
it is
for good or bad. And going to the story, I always have to bring in some of the big high picture view on this series that we do, looking at, the stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. That is a hard, you can't beat that narrative when you're playing into it. That's the whole power of the left, is a different kind of victim power, right? Where they're doing, just look at the sheer audacity, for example, with this horrible shooting where they have turned it into shame on you for being, concerned about the ideology that led to the murder of innocent children. Shame on you for, they've turned it into the victim game right away, where it's like, how dare you even question any of the violent, aggressive things that we have been stoking and normalizing in that community for some time, because they are a sacred cast of victims. Now, the right doesn't have that type of victimism built into its storytelling for culture making for a long time, but they have some victim points that they can play. And like you said, and I believe, there's nothing more, the way you beat collective victimism is an individual victim story. And there's nothing like being in prison running for president. That's Nelson Mandela level if you play it right. But the problem is they always step on their feet. They don't know how to play into that well. The problem with the Trump brand, he's got a schizoid type brand for a second, in the sense that he wants to be the guy, let's give the death penalty to the drug dealer. And then, I'm a saintly victim. And it's like, it just doesn't flow. You got to kind of flow that better, in my opinion. If he had better narrative, consistency, you'd say, look, they said Clinton was the first black president. I really am the first black president because I've been wrongfully accused, just like all those people that we had to help with the First Step Act, that the corrupt DOJ has been thrown away. But he doesn't know how to, do that kind of blend of the narratives. It's push the, because you see what the left does. They say, he says slam their heads into the back of the cop car when you arrest them. So it feels like it's karma when he gets arrested in that framing of it, right? It's like, okay, this is the guy that wants to encourage police to brutalize, someone who's arrested, just slam their head, make sure you don't duck their head in the back seat. But it almost feels like a karma kind of, this was coming for you because you're a bully. But if you can move that into a truly persecuted martyr, who isn't a hypocrite, I think, I don't know, it could be very hard to beat that narrative. Now, that, of course, assumes that, the ballot harvesting thing has been figured out. That's another issue there.
Well, the problem is also what comes afterwards, and like it's one thing to win an election. The question is to what extent that election matters. And the problem is that this is it's funny because in some ways this is the argument that Trump's going to rely upon. But I also
imagine that first cabinet meeting live on C-SPAN in the prison he's at. That'd be hilarious, wouldn't it?
Well, I mean, but the issue though is that again the Trump memes were fun in 2016 because like the possibility of what it could come next, no one knew, and we've known. And the problem is that America is far worse today than it was in November 2016.
You think Trump would make the warden of his prison the chief of staff of his administration or something, just like making deals with people so he can get better commissary food?
Yeah, it would be interesting to see. But I mean, it's the issue. I mean, again, there needs to be some real solutions to what's going on right now. Like that's the frustration.
That's why we've got the Mises Institute here.
Well, I know, but you guys
are the solution people.
The issue is though, is that again, like, we are speed running in civilizational decline right now. Yeah. And again, America, right again, the fact that the mask is dropping on so many areas that, I mean, we are it's easy to lose track. I mean, everything from, again, like, when we talk about the trans shooting, I mean, the media, describing it as a former Christian school, student shooting up people. I mean, it's just, these are things that are beyond parody. And the problem is these things are not going to be
the public that just keeps buying it. They don't get off ship, like they need to be, it's kind of scary.
Yeah, no, it is. And so that's the thing though, is that like, so, question is, what do you do about it? What do you do about it? And again, now we have a situation that we have this very good story with Trump, who did not do anything to really hurt the people that are doing this time around. I mean, again, just earlier this week, you had Trump saying, "Oh, well, that Chris Wray, the director of the FBI, like time might tell, man, that good such he can't, it's such a depressing state.
He might be a good decision."
Yeah, I mean, because it is such a depressing state of things, and it's a dangerous state of things. Again, we're seeing it.
Why would he say that? Why would he say that Chris Wray might be?
Because it's his decision. Because he's the one that put him in power. Yeah. It all comes down to this.
I thought maybe he was trying to curry favor with him to let go of some of the things that he might be involved with all these investigations. I don't know.
No, I mean, and again, there's no negotiating with terrorists anyway, which is a problem in its own right. But I mean, so that's the issue. And again, once you have this gradual erosion of political norms, which is exactly what we're dealing with right now. I mean, it's things can get bad very, very quickly. Yeah. And the response to that isn't like, there is value in having people recognize the extent to which the machine is fragile, which is absolutely true. But the question is, how do you adapt to a decaying society, and how do you meaningfully respond to it? Some of this, I think, goes to, this is why you've seen, I think, a lot more interest in governors' races and power of the states, and I think that's a trend that will continue. But there's still so much damage that can be done.
How much damage to the average American is this Saudi Arabia-Iran deal going to be?
In the short term, I don't think it's worth hyperventilating of. But if you did have a dynamic where the dollar's global reserve standing starts really going away, which again, I think that I think that the political indictment of Trump kind of plays into this. So it's just a lack of stability. Right. If America loses that privilege, then our ability to finance ourselves, I mean, it's going to have a massive effect on American credit. American finances, the value of the dollar, right? We are propped up. We can spend a lot more money than we otherwise could. We can get away with debt that we otherwise could, so long as there is such a robust market for our debt. And when that starts drying up, if global major financial powers need fewer dollars on hand, if they need less U.S. Treasuries, part of their holdings, that is going to have a consequence, and it's going to make it hard. Like, it's, again,
that consequence will be most likely inflation, right?
And inflation, financial instability, stagnation. I mean, there's all sorts of economic consequences.
Pardon my ignorance on this. Is it ever possible to have? Because I remember there was a few Austrian-minded folks who were saying we might have radical deflationary trends when there's a dollar collapse. Is that ever possible, or does it always go in an inflationary thing when you have the end of a world reserve currency? How does that typically? I mean, everybody usually typically talks about it as an hyperinflation scenario. Could it ever go in a deflationary way, or how does that work?
Sure. I mean, you'll have a deflationary dynamic and just the complete collapse of various asset prices. The problem is, so you'll have major deflation on a lot of things. Again, like the value of your 401k, if that crashes, that's deflationary. Yet it doesn't, and yet there's still going to be scarcity for a lot of consumer items that you need. So you could have inflation in certain areas, deflation in other areas.
That's horrible. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like it creates, so your savings are gone.
How would people's homes be in that? Would they be on the more inflationary side, or would they be a deflationary thing?
It likely deflationary, because you're going to have, less people in the marketplace, things like that. But there is this interesting
people's one little hedge of asset would be deflated potentially, and while their food prices could go up. Is that possible?
Yes.
Is there any examples of that? I thought in times of inflation, typically like real estate is like a hedge that people want to flood into, because it's like
well, I mean, it's true, but think about how much. So it's more difficult when you're already dealing with an inflated asset. Right. So like if people so if you have, let's say that the marketplace. So if you think about the 70s, right? The areas you had a lot less, let's say that, people weren't buying homes for like short-term Airbnb style vacation rentals. You have a lot of speculative, a lot of investment style home purchases already juiced up as a result of the housing policies that in response to the last housing bubble, right? We reinflated a housing bubble as a response to the last housing bubble. So having another flight into that, you're right. You're already kind of dealing with an industry, a marketplace there that you already have a lot of heavy investment. Now that would go down. Now that could go back up again, right? Like you could have people pivot to real estate after a crash as a way of getting money out of trying to get your money into a hard asset. But we're still dealing with a lot of inflationary fueled bubbles already. So I can tell you have an evening out of that market until you have an inflationary correction of that, which I think a lot of people underestimate.
Like a frothing cauldron of bubbles. Dear God, you can't even tell which one starts and which one ends. It's so confusing.
And it's difficult to look back historically at exactly the dynamics that America is looking forward, because we're dealing with unprecedented abuses of money, right? What the Fed has been able to engineer, what the globe has engineered. I mean, we've never seen debt levels like this. We've never seen all the creative debt products and financial instruments. I mean, we're not dealing with 1970s finance anymore. Now there are certain things that are true over time, and it's not that the rules of the game apply, but the way that those rules react to vastly different environments are going to change, right? And so again, that's the terrifying thing, is that exactly how a crisis looks. You're not going to just simply, oh well, here's the lessons from here. It's going to be exactly like this. Like, no, you can get wisdom from the past on how to navigate, but it's not going to be the same storm. And even better, the people running things do not have very little experience and very little wisdom. We've got an entire batch of economic PhDs that have no sense of economic history, and so they're driving blind into this as well, into a storm that you can't really track. And that's again a lot of optimism there.
You don't trust Janet Yellen's full faith and credit?
Oh, that's okay. Janet Yellen's already assured us that there's never going to be a financial crisis in our time. So we're good on that.
Well, Tho, I really appreciate your insights, and your cheerful optimism is always warranted. Teasing, but no, you're being true and fair and honest with people, which is what we need. We need to hear, the facts. Do you think they would probably transition us to a CBDC to try to, like, hey, if you want to stay alive, you're gonna have to go to our
Yes,
little
I think
CBDC,
that's absolutely the direction
like
we're
a
going.
pinch, they're gonna
Yeah.
pressure everybody into it,
Yeah, and I mean, they don't even have to pressure it. I mean, imagine if they attach stimulus checks to delivered by central bank digital currency, who's not going to create that digital account with the Fed, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's very easy to see how that would happen, and that's why if the Republican Party in DC has any sort of competency at all, which can nothing to bet on, but that's what they should be fighting on right now. They're going to have some leverage with the debt deal. Their number one priority, I would love to see spending reforms, yada, yada, yada. Great, fine, whatever. Politically toxic, usually not having a lot of optimism there. But the number one thing, the top priority, if they can get only one thing done, it should be an explicit ban on central bank digital currency, because that is the next tool that the regime wants to use to control every other aspect of our lives. And so unless we can proactively declaw a very predictable future event, then the battle going forward is going to be not that much harder. But I do think if what this can allow for, the silver lining going forward, and this is why the governments are acting like this. This is why they're so desperate to debank. It is interesting as Washington is debanking crypto with their occupation. Something for you listeners that are interested. Operation Choke Point 2 is kind of what's going on right now. It's the way that they're kind of systemically choking off crypto aspect or opportunities with the traditional banking system. While the U.S. is doing that, Hong Kong just reopened their Bitcoin exchanges. And the reason why they're doing this is to create the conditions to be able to use this banking crisis as a way of strengthening their control. And this is very predictable. Ultimately, though, I think when we really think of how populist politics can really change things going forward, it's not going to be ballot boxes and voting for whatever politician strikes the right nerves of their anger the most. Ultimately, I do think it'll be economics, and it will be. I think eventually we're going to see a showdown between private money, gold, silver, maybe Bitcoin, but private money, things that are not politically manipulable, versus further centralized and totalitarian central bank digital currency, whether that is the form of digital dollars, euros, etc., or the creation of a global, IMF, supercharged, even more scarier totalitarian money product. I think that ultimately is where this entire conflict between politics, self-determination, economic and financial instability, I think that's where this entire thing heads. And so, it's gonna be very interesting to see who wins that battle.
It all goes back to money, like the Mises Institute's always said, right?
That's exactly right.
So thanks a lot, Tho Bishop. Follow him at Tho Bishop on Twitter and Mises.org, MISES.org. Anything else that we can?
No, I'll always enjoy. I'll always enjoy being with you, David.
Thank you.